Today's recipe is from Noord-Brabant, one of the southern provinces of the Netherlands, where my mom was born and where most of her family still lives. These Worstenbroodjes are bread filled with ground meat that are a perfect snack on the go. Hi, I'm Toine and welcome to my kitchen. If you're new to this channel, I focus on cooking foods from my home country, the Netherlands, and some of its former colonies, such as Indonesia. Today, we are making Worstenbroodjes, a bread filled with ground meat that is actually my dad's recipe. What's funny is when he shared it with me, half of the ingredients are listed as een beetje, literally translated a little bit, no measurements whatsoever. However, when I share it with you today, of course, I'm going to give you suggested measurements to get the same flavor that my dad makes for the family several times a year. We're going to start making the bread portion of this recipe because it needs to rise for about an hour. What you'll need is 1 kilogram of bread flour, 550 milliliters of milk, 40 grams of butter at room temperature, 14 grams of salt. Don't use kosher salt, use like table salt, something finer so it dissolves better, and 14 grams or 2 packets of yeast. I have the flour already in the bowl of our mixer, and now we're going to add the salt on one side and the yeast on the other. You don't want to put them on top of each other because that will actually negatively impact the rising power of the yeast. We're going to add the butter as well. And now I'm going to put it on the mixer and attach the dough hook. We're going to turn the mixer on low, and then I'm going to start pouring in the milk. I warmed the milk up to approximately 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 degrees Celsius. So that is kind of the optimal temperature for yeast. Okay, here we go. We're going to let this go until it forms a ball. You may have to use a spatula to scrape the flour off the edges of the bowl to make sure everything gets thoroughly incorporated. So the dough has shaped into a ball, so now we're going to let it run and knead for another 10 minutes. Silence. That was 10 minutes of kneading. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it in the bowl, cover it, and leave it in a warm spot for approximately an hour until it rises and doubles in size. To make the filling, you will need 1 kilogram of ground meat. The most traditional is half beef, half pork. In this case, we are using all ground beef. 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. Don't buy pre-grated nutmeg. It just loses its potency way too fast. So freshly grated, and 1 tablespoon of yellow mustard. We're going to put everything in the bowl, and then with our hands, which I like wearing gloves when I do this kind of stuff, just mix it all very, very thoroughly until everything is combined. This is 90-10, so it's really not fatty at all. But if your meat is a little bit more fatty because maybe you're using half beef, half pork, having some breadcrumbs to just kind of make sure that it isn't going to make the bottom of the bread soggy can help. But my dad uses half and half meat and never adds breadcrumbs to it. But I've seen several recipes online where they recommend you do add some to the ground meat. I've combined it all, and now we have to turn this into 30 evenly sized pieces. And the way my dad does that is actually rolls it out to a log that is 60 centimeters long and then cuts it into 2-centimeter pieces. You can also use a scale, but I'm going to use the log method. To prepare for rolling out the log of meat and cutting it in even pieces, I wrote or I drew a line on the back of parchment paper and put 2 centimeter marks on. So I'm going to kind of use that as my guide as I start cutting it. But first, I have to turn this into a large log of meat that is as even as possible. Again, I can just kind of look at the marks on the paper, and I used a ballpoint pen to write on the bottom. I wouldn't use something like a Sharpie or a permanent marker because I would hate for it to seep through the paper and end up on or in your beef or in your ground meat. You can of course do this on your clean countertops as well without having the parchment paper. I like the parchment paper for 2 reasons. One, I don't have to deal with raw meat on my counter and afterwards sanitizing it, and I can also write on this parchment paper so I can see kind of a guide of where I have to cut it. So I'm going to start on the right hand side. I don't know why, but that's just how I like to do it. And we are going to cut every 2 centimeters. So what you're going to do is you're going to shape the ground meat into a log. I'm kind of using the width of my hand as a guide, and I think that's approximately 6 to 7 centimeters. So sausage and Worstenbroodjes are 2 different words, but if you were to translate that to English, they both translate to the same thing, sausage bread or sausage roll. But of course, one is puff pastry and the other is a regular bread around the meat. The seasoning of the meat is different between the 2 recipes as well. Now the cool thing is that there are no hard or fast rules for the seasoning of the meat. So if you like to add some sambal or some other flavoring to the meat when you make these Worstenbroodjes, you can definitely do this. But this is the traditional Brabantse Worstenbroodje recipe. So of course, this method that my dad uses is quicker than individually weighing them out, but probably not as accurate. However, it's good enough. They don't all have to be exactly the same size. This is not a factory here, right? This is all handmade, home-baked goods. So if they're not exactly the same size, it's going to work out when you start shaping the rolls. So here are the last 2. And I'm kind of noticing that this one actually is a little thicker than the other. So I just took a little and added it to this little sausage that seems a little wimpy compared to the others. So just going to re-roll that one. Here's the last one. As you can see, the dough has doubled in size. So first I'm going to punch it down to degas it, and then I am going to form it into a ball. But first I have to just dust my work surface with a little bit of flour so it doesn't stick. You don't want to do too much because you don't want there to be any excess flour added. So I'm going to just give it a little bit of a knead and then shape it into a ball so that we can then go on to the next step. I'm going to get a piece of parchment paper, do the same thing like I did with the meat, put a line on there that is 60 centimeters long with tick marks on every 2 centimeters, and then we'll start cutting this into 30 even little pieces. Gently roll it and keep stretching it out until it gets to that 60 centimeter mark. I rolled it into a log and I was able to roll it to be 60 centimeters, but I had to really work it. So I'm actually going to let it sit here for probably 5 to 10 minutes, let the gluten relax a little bit before I start cutting it into 2 centimeter pieces. So now I am going to cut it into even pieces and roll it into balls. I'm going to store those or put those on a cookie sheet lined with some parchment paper. And what we're going to do there actually is put a damp towel over it and let it sit while we prepare the meat to be put inside of the bread. And just like with the meat, if you want to weigh instead of the log measuring method, you can do that as well. So I have made 30 balls out of the dough, and they're pretty even. They're not perfect, but it will work out just fine. I'm now gonna cover them or recover them with a damp towel, put them in a warm spot for half an hour, and then we will start assembling the Worstenbroodjes. While the balls of dough are proofing, I am prepping the little sausage logs to be put inside of them. And you do that by just rolling them into some flour, not too much, but just a little bit. And what that does is it will actually keep the outside of the sausage a little bit dry so that you don't have to worry too much about sogginess of the dough. Make sure that you coat even the two little edges, and I typically shake off any excess before putting them on this cookie sheet. So my dad has a tradition now with my niece, is that whenever he makes worstenbroodjes, she comes over and helps him, and it's some nice bonding time between the two of them. I've never made worstenbroodjes with my dad, but I'm telling you, next time he comes to visit us or I go to visit him, I'm gonna have him show me how he does it versus just reading his written recipe with a beetje this and a beetje that. Let's take a look at the dough balls after they've risen for another 30 minutes. They have gotten quite large. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a whole station going on. We have the sausages floured laying right here. We have the dough balls right here. Cutting board, rolling pin. I have some flour to dust it with, and then a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. And we're going to build them one worstenbroodje at a time. So actually let's start with dusting the board a little bit. And we're going to take one of these, flatten it, and we're going to roll it not quite into a circle, more like an oval. And you want to make sure that it is big enough to hold the meat. And since I know the meat is approximately the width of my hand, this will work. We're going to lay this on here. Going to pull over the right side. Going to pull over the left side. And we're going to pinch. And now we're going to roll it on the board. And just pinch one more time, because you want to make sure that that stays nice and sealed. And I'm going to lay it here. Now, to make sure that these don't dry out, I actually have a damp towel that I'm going to lay over it. And we go to the next one. While I am assembling the worstenbroodjes, I also have the oven preheating on a non-convection 410 degrees Fahrenheit or 210 degrees Celsius. When you put them on the cookie sheet, put them seam down. Flatten the dough, roll it out until it is an oval like this, big enough that it will hold the sausage. I'm going to pull the two sides over, and then we're going to pull the front and the back towards each other and pinch it. To put some pressure on there to really pinch it. If for some reason the dough isn't sticking, you can wet it a little bit with a little bit of water. Our dough stayed nice and moist, so I don't think I need to do that. And then we just roll it on the board. And then I like to kind of push in the sides a little bit and put it with the seam down on the cookie sheet. I've made an egg wash with some egg and water. I'm now going to brush all of the worstenbroodjes, and then we're going to pop them into the oven. So I have 2 racks evenly spaced from the middle of the oven, and I'm going to put them in for a total of 15 minutes. What I'm going to do, though, is at the 7-minute mark, I am going to swap top and bottom and also rotate back and front. First 7 minutes has passed, so we're going to rotate top and bottom and also front to back. So and now they cook for another 8 minutes. It's been a total of 15 minutes, but just to be sure, I'm going to poke one of them, and as long as the temperature of the meat is above 165, you know it's fully cooked, and we can now take them out and let them cool off. All the Worstenbroodjes, they have a beautiful color on them. They're done, and we're now going to let them cool before we're going to eat them because they are way too hot to eat. Now the moment I've been waiting for to try one of our Worstenbroodjes. Now this is typically finger food. You would just pick it up and eat it, maybe dip it in some sauce. What I really like is some Curry Gewürz Ketchup, which is like a spicy ketchup. But I want to show you what the inside looks like, so I'm going to use a knife and fork. And show you, we have the sausage in the middle, perfectly cooked or baked bread around it. So now let's try a bite. Eet Smakelijk. It's great. The bread is still nice and fluffy. The meat is perfectly seasoned. The nutmeg is just a faint hint. It's not overpowering. Absolutely how I remember them. So as a kid and still as an adult, I like to eat it with some of the Curry Gewürz Ketchup. So I'm going to put a little bit of on my plate and dip it in and have another bite. The ketchup, which has a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of spice, really complements this Worstenbroodje very well in my mind. But it's also fantastic without any condiments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like and subscribe button and don't forget to share it with your friends. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I will post my recipe on the website, toineskitchen.com, and you can also follow me on social media. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.